Welcome to another episode of the VCDX Podcast, a short bi-weekly podcast focused on the VCDX certification with news, updates, advice, and special guests. My name is Simon Long, VCDX number 105, and this week I'll be chatting to my special guest about VCDX defense preparation, finding time in our busy work and home schedules, and making the most of the limited time we have. Here's a taste of what's coming up. You're managing to find 30 minutes or an hour here and there between your busy life at work and your family life at home, and just to do a couple of bits and pieces here and there each day to try and get yourself prepared.
So I've been doing this for about 18 months really seriously, and it's definitely a marathon and not a sprint. Every night, instead of going to watch the TV, then it's kind of, well, actually I need to sit down and get an hour on my design, and you move forward that way.
With the next set of VCDX panels just a little over a week away, we're a little bit short of news and updates this episode, so we'll move on to the guest interview. You're listening to the VCDX Podcast. On to our guest interview. Who is this episode's special guest? Give me your name and your number.
My name is Chris Porter, and at present I don't have a VCDX number.
What? So some of you may be listening and thinking to yourself, well, why has Simon brought on a guest that doesn't have a VCDX? Well, Chris is actually defending in June in a couple of weeks, and I wanted Chris to join me on the podcast to talk about how he's preparing for the defense. And just to let you in a little secret, I'm also planning on having Chris back after his defense, assuming that he'll still agree to that, to find out how it went, what went well, what didn't go so well, and things like that. But before we go into that, Chris, tell us, what is your current role and what you typically do on a daily basis?
So thanks for having me on in this slightly strange circumstance of not being a VCDX or a panelist or any of the other people that probably be far more, relevant. I don't know. Maybe I've got something to say, but so day to day I work for a bank in London, and I'm an infrastructure architect, and my day job consists of working with the engineering and DevOps team that I'm part of, trying to get new projects over the line, work to improve existing infrastructure, and then work with application teams to onboard new systems. Doing a lot of kind of cloud stuff at the moment.
Okay, so do you kind of just focus in one business unit, or do you get involved in architecture across the whole company, or how does?
So we're kind of the bank I work for is split into kind of three distinct divisions, and I kind of focus on one of those. And within that, there's a number of different business units that I work across all of those. So depending on what the needs are, we'll work more closely with one unit than another. Some of them are slightly more autonomous in their IT delivery, but and I guess bringing it relevant to VCDX, whilst we're kind of focusing on cloud at the moment, we do have a very large VMware estate, and that's something I'm responsible for in terms of the architecture as well.
Cool. That sounds like quite an interesting role. So one of the things that you've been preparing for the VCDX defense is something that you've called 90 days of VCDX prep, which I've been following, and I'm sure many others have been following on Twitter. So can you tell us a bit more about what the 90 days of VCDX prep is and why you decided to do this?
It's the hashtag. Got to have a hashtag, which is 90 days of VCDX prep, and that it's kind of inspired by. There's a hashtag for 100 days of code, where people kind of track that they're learning a new programming language or learning to code, and so kind of got inspired by that, and it was really just to motivate me to make sure I was trying to do something every day and keep me honest, and I thought it'd be interesting for people to follow. And I kind of realized I think I was 92 or 91 days away from when I was planning to prep in June, so I kind of just thought it'd be a bit of fun to do that and track it. I think it seems to get some interest from people, so hopefully it's useful and entertaining. I think it's going to get more entertaining as I kind of build up towards defending, and then it will go quiet. Definitely.
I mean, I think as I've been reading through them as they come through each day, I think other people would find them interesting because you're not necessarily sitting down and doing 3 hours of hard work every evening to prepare. It's just you're managing to find 30 minutes or an hour here and there between your busy life at work and your family life at home. And just to do a couple of bits and pieces here and there each day to try and, get yourself prepared rather than, I think a lot of people feel that they need to dedicate a lot of time, like hours each night throughout the week to be able to do this. But I think it shows in your instance that it's maybe not always the case.
Yeah, it's something for the whole VCDX process. So I've been doing this for about 18 months really seriously, and it's definitely a marathon and not a sprint. I know some people like to talk about they were up at 5 a.m. and then they were sort of working late, and they do that day in day out, but that's just not for me. I realized that very early on that I needed kind of sleep to function in my job and to function the next day working on VCDX. So but then certainly I have put a lot of time into it when I was actually preparing the submission, certainly through the last 6 months of last year, and spent a lot of time and dedicated time to it. But also it's just finding 20 minutes on the train. I'd go out for an hour at lunchtime and then do a bit in the evening, and then have some time over the weekends. And I've just carried that on into my preparation. So it's just trying to find every spare minute to kind of work on it. But as you say, not necessarily doing 3 or 4 hours every night. And we shall see whether that pays off or not. But for me, that's the way I've been able to continue going with the process. I think any other approach for me necessarily, I wouldn't be this far along. You've got to find your own comfort that keeps you going but doesn't completely burn you out.
And definitely, and if you're one of those people that doesn't have as much time as maybe others, all you need to do is just stretch your timelines out a little bit longer. Rather than saying, okay, I'm going to be done in a year's time. Look, they may be going to be done in 18 months or 2 years' time, because you don't have that. There's much time as some of the other people that can dedicate hours each day, or, so just kind of set your expectations right, in that if you don't have so much time, it's going to take you a little bit longer, but you can certainly get there.
And I think it's about making sacrifices. You're absolutely right about extending it out and taking your time to work through it. But it's also, for me, I was fairly fit before I started. I'm less fit now, but I was sort of going out cycling or running at lunchtime or those kind of things. And I couldn't, with a young family as well, justify doing those things and spending as much time as I could on my VCDX. So I approach it in working on VCDX as this period of my life, and then once that's done and finished, whatever happens, then I will change to something else. I hope to live to a ripe old age, so I've got plenty of time to focus on one thing and do that properly, and then focus on something else afterwards.
So I think if you end up having too many things that you feel that you need to do, you end up feeling the pressure, and it adds to the stress of things, and it just overwhelms you at that point. So I think you made a really good decision there, in kind of taking out some of the things that you used to do before, giving yourself some time, and then as soon as you're done, you back to doing that or something else that you've been kind of really wanting to do whilst you've been studying. So. Yeah,
exactly. And I think one of the simplest things you can do is just I mean, it can be hard, but kind of give up on a lot of TV. I think so many people talk about box sets they've watched and all the films they want to get through and things like that. And if you kind of give yourself that as a reward at the end of the week, and an hour of TV or whatever, or one film or something, but every night, instead of going to watch the TV, then it's kind of, well, actually, I need to sit down and get an hour of my design, and you move forward that way.
Yeah, and the good thing with TV nowadays is that it'll be there when you're done as well. Like, before you didn't have no way of recording it, it'll always be there.
Yeah, exactly. Or you're trying to avoid spoilers. So,
Yeah. I hope you're not doing the Game of Thrones right now, because it's very difficult to avoid spoilers for that.
Well, that is my kind of guilty pleasure. So at the moment, I did catch up a few years ago. So that's kind of once a week. That's what I'll sit down and watch. So partly because, in a large part, you can't really avoid the spoilers. So.
No, definitely not, and it's highly worth taking that hour each week for sure. So just out of interest, during your preparations, you've been doing a lot of different activities, as we've seen from your Twitter feed. Like, what would you say is the most beneficial activity that you've found that you've been doing along the way?
So I think one of the, I don't know if it's necessarily an activity, but something I carried out was something I found from Mike Burkhart when he was preparing, and he tweeted that he'd printed out his design and got it bound, and that's something I did fairly early on in my preparation. And whilst I tried to avoid printing things and cutting down the trees, it was having that physical media. I actually carry it around with me in my bag all the time, and it's been something I'll refer to and look at, but mainly just when you're working on your presentation, you want to flick back and forth and pick details out. That's been really, really helpful. So I definitely recommend doing that. And then I think really the mocks, certainly the mock design scenario, it's daunting, and when I organize them, you sit there and you really don't want to start, and you're kind of going through it and you just want it to finish because it's very, very intense. Your people are playing customer, and you've got to come up with the ideas and the design and pick things out. But I think a lot of the advice I've received and what I've read is that that's one area that people really don't focus on in terms of their defense. And I've still got a lot to prep to do, and I feel like I probably won't be ready, but I'm doing some of those. So I think that's useful to do to take the fear away a little bit.
Definitely. I don't think you'll ever feel ready for the for the defense, but I think the more you do it, the more comfortable you're going to feel, right? You don't want the first defense to be your actual defense. Like as painful as awkward as it is to do these things, and Chris, I know exactly how you feel. It's not pleasant to put yourself through these things, but it will make a big difference to you. And as a panelist, you can see the people who come into this, and you can see the difference in their prep. You can tell the people come in and they're confident and they know how to structure and they have a flow to the way they're doing things. And there's some people who just come in and kind of wing it, really, and you can really tell the difference.
It's also one of the areas when I started VCDX that for me, VCDX wasn't about just achieving a certification. In fact, it really wasn't about that. It was about developing my skills and pushing myself to learn that architecture methodology. And being able to whiteboard and learn a process to do that was something that I wanted to pick up and learn and have a methodology around. So it's an area that's daunting, but I just really get the benefit from doing it.
I think those skills will be with you longer than the technology will be with you. As virtualization moves on to something different, those skills will still be there with you, and it's, as you say, it's kind of skills for life. So Chris, something else you've been involved in is something called the Virtual Design Master, and I think many of our listeners would be interested in this. So can you tell us a bit more what the Virtual Design Master is and how it would maybe benefit someone who is considering or actively going for the VCDX?
Yeah, so Virtual Design Master was something I took part in 2 years ago, and I describe it as reality TV for geeks. It's a really interesting and great community project that's run by Eric Wright, Giuliano Luciani, and Melissa Palmer. And when I took part in it, it was season 5 of Virtual Design Master, so they've been running it every year for 4 years before that. And you basically get set a scenario, and you have to come up with a design, and you submit the design so this is on a weekly basis. You can I think you get the scenario set on a Thursday, you have to submit a design by the Tuesday, and then on a Thursday you have to they broadcast it live on YouTube. It's done via Zoom, and you have to defend that design. And they start with 12 participants, and eventually over the 4 weeks you get to the I think it's the 5th week, there's a final, and there's 3 of you. And that's the final is you actually get some infrastructure to play with, and you have to answer the scenario, submit the design, but also implement it. And the panelists will log in and look at your work, basically. So, cool. Yeah, in terms of, it was an intense process, and not only because the folks running it are in the US, so I think the defense was 1 o'clock in the morning, our time. Yeah. So it was full on, and I just kind of threw my hat in the ring and thought I'd see how it goes week by week, and then people dropped out, and then I was lucky enough to eventually get to the end and win season 5. So
that's awesome.
It was a fantastic experience. It was really great to be part of, and it really helped me start to gain confidence in my design skills and give me that boost to think that I could achieve VCDX. So about 6 months after that, that's when I really started VCDX in earnest.
That's cool. It's like, as you say, it sounds like the Great British Bake Off, but for geeks, right?
Yeah.
And it's cool as well. So each week, or they have a different scenario, or a kind of Okay,
yeah.
so that's a really good way of kind of learning how to think outside of the box, because quite a lot of the time for people who are going to VCDX, they may have only ever seen and done one design before, and this is a great way of taking requirements from something that's completely different and maybe out of your comfort zone and trying to figure out what to do with those requirements.
Exactly, and it was the scenarios are put together by Melissa, and it's sort of based on a somewhat of a space theme, and then 1 week there'll be security based, and something else another week will be more sort of deployment based. It's kind of loosely based on those things, and then it certainly heads towards the VCDX piece, and that you can ask the guys questions. And so, do you have any assumptions, and document those pieces? I think they might be changing it for this year. So there's a new season starting shortly, and cool. I don't know if they're doing something slightly different, but I definitely recommend anyone looking at VCDX or preparing for VCDX to email and get involved and put your name in to participate.
Yeah, that sounds really, really good preparation for the VCDX as well. What I'll do is I'll stick the link to the website in the show notes. So if anyone's interested in going for that, just look in the show notes and you'll be able to sign up for it. But Chris, it's been an absolute pleasure having on the podcast. I wish you the best of luck for your defense in a couple of weeks' time. And I look forward to having you back on shortly to share your experiences with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, and I'll look to be back as long as I'm not curled up and whimpering in a ball.
You'll be absolutely fine, don't you worry. Thanks, mate. So this week is my turn to talk to you about a common VCDX mistake that I see very regularly throughout my time as a panelist. And this VCDX mistake is around assumptions. Now, I see a lot of designs that have assumptions like network bandwidth between data centers is adequate for storage replication, or load balancers would be used to load balance Horizon connection servers, or Active Directory, DNS, NTP is configured throughout the environment. Now, these are things that we really shouldn't be assuming. You need to think to yourself, if I'm making this assumption and I'm actually incorrect, what would be the outcome to this design? If the outcome would leave the customer's environment in a bad state, then it's probably something that you need to look in a little bit more closer, work with the customer, ask the questions, and actually find out, do they have enough bandwidth? Do they have Active Directory? Have they got NTP configured throughout the environment? So this is something I see regularly on the panels, and definitely something I'd recommend to avoid if possible. Let's try and remove all assumptions from our design. So that's it for my common mistake this episode. And we'll have some more for you in future episodes. So let's move on to the question of the week. This week's question comes from Dmitry Tanurkov, and I hope I haven't mispronounced your last name there. And it's around the presentation at the start of the VCDX defense. And he asks, do the candidates have 10 to 15 minutes to speak with minimum interruption from the panel or otherwise? And it's a question I get a lot. A lot of people want to know what to expect. And the truth of it is that no two defenses are alike. There may be a time when a candidate comes in and they start to do their presentation, and we will listen for 10-15 minutes and we won't necessarily have questions at that point. And there'll be another defense where a candidate comes in and literally the first or second slide, one of the panelists will have a question for them. So it's very difficult for us to say, okay, you're going to have 15 minutes before we actually, start to ask questions. There has been times on occasion where I've purposely asked a question, maybe an easy question at the start of the presentation, just to help relax the candidate. Because sometimes people come in, they're very nervous, and all they need sometimes is just a nice simple question that they can easily answer, just to kind of put themselves at ease and to kind of get them moving and flowing again. So my recommendation to you, Dimitri, is to, first of all, have a 10-15 minute presentation and make sure you're comfortable with it without any questions. Make sure you know it off by heart. And then start to practice in it like a mock panel type thing where people will ask questions every now and again. And I think because you'll be comfortable with the content of your presentation, because you're kind of familiar with it and you're used to talking about it, if you get sidetracked by a question from the panelist, it won't be too difficult for you to kind of get back into the flow of your presentation again. So that would be definitely something I'd recommend there, is practice the presentation without interruption until you're comfortable with it, and then start to practice the presentation with interruptions. So that way you're prepared whether you get asked questions straight out of the gate or whether you get to the end of your presentation before you start to have questions. So I hope that answers your question. If anyone else has any more questions that we can answer in future episodes of this podcast, you can tweet them to me at simonlong_, or you can send me a message via my website, simonlong.co.uk/blog, and go to the Contacts Me page, and there's a form there you can fill in if you have any questions. So that's it for another episode of the VCDX podcast. Thanks again to my special guest, Chris Porter. Best of luck for your VCDX defense next week. For those of you tuning in for the first time, I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please be sure to subscribe and share with others who might find this podcast interesting. I'll speak to you again in 2 weeks' time.